Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was not just a leader, a teacher, or a messenger. He was the living embodiment of mercy. His entire mission, as described in the Quran, was encapsulated in the phrase, "And we have not sent you, O Muhammad, except as a mercy to the worlds." Quran 21:107. That mercy wasn't limited to his followers or even to human beings. It extended to animals, to the environment, to his enemies, to all of creation. The Prophet's way was rooted in deep compassion, empathy, and gentleness, even in the face of hostility, betrayal, and injustice. So when we hear about him ordering the killing of a creature, an act that seems on the surface to contradict that mercy, it becomes all the more essential to understand the context and deeper wisdom behind such decision. In his life, the Prophet PBUH constantly displayed incredible sensitivity to life. He once saw a bird distressed because someone had taken its chicks, and he immediately instructed the companions to return them. He warned against killing animals for sport or tormenting them without cause. He told of a woman who went to hell for starving a cat, and another who entered paradise for giving water to a thirsty dog. These weren't just moral lessons. They were powerful reflections of a worldview in which mercy was central, non-negotiable, and sacred. But Islam, while profoundly merciful, is not naive. It does not call for mercy at the expense of justice or peace at the price of passivity. There's a deep balance between compassion and protection. The Prophet PBUH understood this balance perfectly. When he ordered the killing of certain creatures, for instance, the harmful black scorpion, a venomous snake, or a rabid dog, it wasn't a contradiction of mercy. It was mercy in action. Because when a creature poses an immediate and unpredictable danger to human life, to children, to the vulnerable, leaving it unchecked is not compassion. It's negligence. The Prophet's decisions were always rooted in principle. His guidance wasn't based on emotion, but on divine wisdom. Removing a creature that causes harm wasn't about hatred or fear. It was about protecting the sanctity of life. In Islamic law, this principle is known as al-Mafsada, the prevention of harm. And that too is a form of mercy. Sometimes saving the many requires removing the one, not out of cruelty, but out of responsibility. And we can apply this understanding far beyond the specific incidents mentioned in Haiti, because the same principle teaches us how to deal with toxic patterns, destructive behavior, and even spiritual disease. Just like the Prophet, PBUH removed the harmful creature to protect the community. We are taught to remove what is harmful in our own hearts, in our homes, and in society. Whether it's arrogance, envy, hatred, or injustice, mercy doesn't mean tolerating poison. It means healing it, removing it, sometimes forcefully, but always with purpose. So the mercy of the Prophet PBUH wasn't just soft, it was strong. It was not passive, it was protective. It embraced the innocent, but confronted the dangerous. It forgave the repentant, but stood firm against oppression. That is the mercy Islam teaches, and it is that kind of mercy that changes hearts, protects lives, and builds lasting peace. True mercy isn't just about how softly you speak. It's about how deeply you care and how far you're willing to go to protect what is right. That is the mercy of Muhammad. That is the mercy of Islam. The specific creature referred to in many hadith traditions is not symbolic or metaphorical. It is quite literally a physical threat to human life and safety. Among these creatures, scholars have often cited the black scorpion, certain types of venomous snakes, and rabid dogs as examples. In Sahih Muslim and Sahih al-Bukhari, authentic hadith collections, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, made exceptions to the general prohibition against killing animals by identifying 5 harmful creatures that could be killed even within the sacred precincts of Mecca. These included the scorpion, the crow, the kite, a predatory bird, the mouse, and the rabid dog. The common denominator among all of them, they posed a direct, unpredictable, and often lethal danger to humans. Let's take the scorpion, for example, particularly the black scorpion native to the Arabian Peninsula. This creature is not only aggressive, but also highly venomous. Its sting can lead to immense pain, swelling, paralysis, and in many cases, death, especially for children, the elderly, or the weak. In a time and place with limited access to medical treatment, anti-venom, or modern emergency care, the presence of such a creature wasn't just a nuisance. It was a life-threatening risk. This was not a world of hospitals and ambulances. It was a world where a single sting could mean the loss of a life within hours. So when the Prophet, PBUH, ordered such creatures to be killed, it wasn't an act of cruelty. It was an act of protection. The same reasoning applied to rabid dogs. But while dogs in Islam are generally not to be harmed without cause, and are even honored in certain stories and parables, a dog infected with rabies becomes a walking hazard. Rabies is a terrifying disease. In its late stages, it leads to aggression, confusion, hallucinations, and eventually death. It's also highly contagious through bites or saliva. Once symptoms appear, there is almost no cure. So imagine a rabid dog walking through a village, biting children or livestock. It becomes not just a danger, but a source of widespread suffering. In that context, killing such an animal is not born out of hatred for dogs. It is a necessary intervention to protect the lives of the community. What's important to understand is that Islam, at its core, honors all of Allah's creation. The Prophet, PBUH, didn't give blanket permission to kill any animal one found annoying or frightening. His order was precise, intentional, and deeply contextual. Scorpions, venomous snakes, rabid dogs were listed not for their looks but for their lethality. Their presence threatened the safety, health, and well-being of innocent people. In this light, their removal was not just allowed, it was required. This also underscores a deeper Islamic principle. When something becomes purely harmful, with no redeeming benefit, it is no longer protected under the general rules of mercy. The line between compassion and danger is drawn with wisdom. And in the wisdom of the Prophet, PBUH, the killing of these creatures was an act of responsible leadership, one that prioritized the lives of the many over the threat of the few. In the teachings of Islam, all creatures are part of Allah's creation and are generally to be treated with compassion and care. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, taught his followers to be kind to animals, forbade unnecessary harm, and emphasized mercy as a guiding principle in all matters. However, within this merciful framework, there are carefully defined exceptions. Specific instances where a creature becomes so harmful, so threatening, that its continued presence poses a risk to human life and well-being. In such cases, eliminating that threat becomes not only permissible but necessary. This is where the exception arises. The creatures mentioned in authentic hadith, such as the venomous snake, black scorpion, and rabid dog, fall into a unique category. These are not ordinary animals simply living in nature. They are creatures whose behavior and biology pose a direct, uncontrollable danger to human life. The Prophet, PBUH, did not give sweeping permission to kill all such animals, but rather pointed out a handful that were so harmful, so lethal in nature, that even in Islam's holiest sanctuary, the Haram of Makkah, where even cutting down trees and hunting is prohibited, they could be killed without sin. This exception highlights just how serious and dangerous these creatures were. Take the black scorpion, for instance. It is not simply feared because of its appearance. Its venom can cause immense pain, paralysis, and in many cases, death, particularly among children, the elderly, or the sick. In the environment of 7th century Arabia, without hospitals, antivenoms, or reliable medical care, a sting from such a creature could mean the end of a life. Similarly, the venomous snake was not seen as just another animal. It was a stealthy, often unseen predator that could strike without warning, with fatal consequences. And the rabid dog, though dogs in general are not to be harmed without reason in Islam, becomes a vessel for one of the deadliest diseases known to mankind. Rabies causes madness, aggression, and inevitable death, and it is transmitted easily through bites. When such a dog roamed a village, the threat it posed was not hypothetical. It was immediate and terrifying. In Islamic jurisprudence, there is a principle known as daf al-dar, the removal of harm. This principle forms the basis of many rulings from medical treatment to legal justice. If something poses serious harm and there is no alternative means of neutralizing it, then action must be taken to remove that threat. These harmful creatures fit perfectly into this principle. Their presence doesn't just inconvenience a few people, it endangers entire communities, particularly the most vulnerable among them. Furthermore, these animals were not being hunted for sport, profit, or out of hatred. There was no joy in their death, no celebration in their removal. The command to kill them was utilitarian, purposeful, and precise. It was a reflection of the Prophet's role as a protector of the people, of the community, and of life itself. This is not a contradiction to his mercy. It is a manifestation of that mercy in its most practical, protective form. This exception also teaches a broader lesson. Islam is not a faith that demands blind mercy. It is a faith that calls for wise mercy, the kind that knows when to forgive and when to act, when to show patience and when to intervene. The creatures that were named exceptions were not punished. They were identified for what they were, threats to the preservation of life. And in a religion that considers saving one life as saving all of humanity, the removal of such a threat is a sacred duty, not a contradiction of compassion. In Islamic law and ethics, one of the most foundational and far-reaching principles is al-Mafsada, Darar, which means the prevention or removal of harm. This principle permeates nearly every aspect of Sharia, from personal conduct and family matters to public policy and criminal justice. At its core, it is rooted in the recognition that Islam is a religion not just of rituals, but of preservation, of life, dignity, intellect, lineage, property, and faith. When harm threatens any of these essential values, the Sharia gives clear guidance. That harm must be prevented, and if it cannot be prevented, it must be removed. This principle is drawn from several key texts in the Quran and the Sunnah. One of the most famous hadiths upon which scholars base this rule is Allah Darar wa Allah Darar, meaning I do not cause harm, nor reciprocate harm. This short yet powerful statement from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has been used by Islamic jurists for centuries to frame entire categories of rulings. It establishes not only the prohibition of harm, but also the obligation to actively avoid causing it, even unintentionally, and to mitigate it when it arises. In practical terms, this principle has vast implications. For example, if a person's business causes pollution that harms the health of a neighborhood, that harm must be stopped, even if the business is otherwise lawful. If a practice within the family leads to emotional or physical abuse, it cannot be justified by culture or tradition. It must be corrected. The priority in every situation is to preserve well-being, to safeguard the innocent, and to uphold justice. Now, when it comes to creatures like venomous animals or rabid dogs, the types mentioned by the Prophet, PBUH and Hadith, the application of this principle becomes very clear. These are beings that by their very nature inflict unpredictable and sometimes fatal harm. They are not simply animals acting in defense or survival. Their danger is constant, and the threat they pose is not limited to one person, but to entire communities, especially in environments without modern medicine or facility. Killing such a creature is not seen as an act of aggression or cruelty, but as a necessary application of the principle of Darar. It's important to note that in Islam, this principle is always balanced with others, such as the preservation of life and the respect for creation. Therefore, harm is never to be removed recklessly. The action taken must be proportionate, thoughtful, and the last resort when other options are not viable. For instance, if a snake or dog can be captured and relocated safely without risk, that is preferred. But when the threat is immediate and relocation is not possible, then eliminating that threat becomes not only justified, it becomes obligatory. This principle is also deeply relevant in modern times. It forms the basis for many Islamic rulings on contemporary issues such as disease control, drug abuse, domestic violence, and environmental protection. Wherever harm spreads, whether it's physical, emotional, spiritual, or social, the obligation of the believer is to contain and remove that harm in the most effective and ethical way possible. In the actions and teachings of Prophet Muhammad, PBUH, we see a living embodiment of this principle. He did not wait for harm to escalate. He acted when needed, firmly, wisely, and with the clear intent of protecting life and upholding justice. The principle of prevention of harm is not just a legal maxim. It is a reflection of the Islamic worldview, one that stands guard over the sanctity of life and calls each believer to do the same. The teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, are not relics of the past. They are timeless principles designed to guide humanity in every age. When we examine why he ordered the removal of certain harmful creatures, we see far more than a moment of historical necessity. We uncover deep wisdom, wisdom that speaks directly to the challenges and moral dilemmas of our modern world. These lessons stretch far beyond dealing with animals. They teach us how to confront danger, protect the vulnerable, and balance mercy with justice in a world that often confuses the two. One of the first lessons we learn is the value of decisive responsibility. In today's world, many people struggle with taking action when it's difficult or unpopular, even when harm is evident. The Prophet's command to eliminate certain threats shows us that compassion doesn't mean passivity. It's not merciful to let danger fester in the name of peace. Whether it's a harmful ideology, a toxic relationship, an abusive system, or a disease spreading through a population, sometimes real mercy lies in taking firm, uncomfortable steps to stop that harm from spreading. Silence in the face of danger is not compassion, it's complicity. Another powerful lesson is the protection of life as the highest priority. In Islam, human life is sacred. It is to be preserved and safeguarded above all else. That's why the Prophet, PBUH, made exceptions for killing specific harmful creatures, not because he wanted to override the mercy of Islam, but because protecting innocent life came first. Today, we must apply this same principle to how we deal with public health, war, injustice, or any form of violence. Whether it's enforcing health protocols during a pandemic or standing against violence in a community, Islam teaches that preservation of life is non-negotiable. There's also a lesson in wise judgment. The Prophet, PBUH, didn't declare war on all snakes, all dogs, or all wild animals. His decisions were precise. He distinguished between what was generally harmless and what was unusually dangerous. That same discernment is something humanity desperately needs today. Too often, we react with extremes, banning, blaming, or targeting entire groups based on the actions of a few. The Sunnah teaches us to judge based on facts, context, and wisdom, not fear or generalization. Furthermore, this issue reminds us of the importance of proactive leadership. The Prophet, PBUH, didn't wait until someone was bidden to act. He warned his followers in advance. He created a culture of awareness and accountability. In our world, leaders in every field, whether political, educational, or spiritual, must take that same proactive stance. Don't wait for disaster. Prepare for it. Prevent it. Protect people before the harm reaches them. Lastly, the greatest lesson is that true mercy includes justice. In a time where tolerance is often mistaken for turning a blind eye, the Prophet's example shows us that mercy sometimes means saying no. It means standing up to harm, removing evil, and protecting what is good. And it means doing so not with hate, but with love. Love for humanity, for peace, and for the safety of the innocent. In a world full of moral confusion and rising harm, these lessons from the Prophet's guidance are a beacon. They remind us that mercy is not weakness, it's strength, it's action, it's wisdom. And above all, it's responsibility. The actions and teachings of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, carry profound spiritual symbolism, transcending the immediate physical acts themselves to offer deep moral and ethical lessons for humanity. One of the most striking aspects of the Prophet's life is how every decision, including those seemingly as practical as ordering the killing of harmful creatures, carries a deeper spiritual significance. These actions reveal not just laws or guidelines, but embody a philosophy of life that aligns with the core values of Islam: justice, mercy, wisdom, and the preservation of life. When the Prophet, PBUH, identified specific harmful creatures such as the black scorpion, venomous snakes, and rabid dogs as exceptions to the general rule of animal protection, he was teaching a crucial lesson about the balance between the sanctity of life and the necessity to prevent harm. These creatures symbolize more than just physical danger. They became metaphors for harmful forces in life that threaten the well-being of individuals and society. Just as these dangerous creatures were to be removed to protect the community, so too must we actively remove harmful influences in our own lives, whether they be negative emotions, destructive habits, toxic relationships, or harmful ideologies. Furthermore, the principle of Darar, the prevention of harm, reflects the spiritual value of safeguarding not just physical life, but also spiritual integrity. In Islam, there is a constant emphasis on purification of the soul, removing the poisons of pride, envy, and greed that cloud one's heart. Just as the Prophet, Pamba took action to remove physical dangers from the environment. Believers are urged to protect their hearts from harmful spiritual influences. The same wisdom that guided the prophet Peba in dealing with physical threats is applicable in the realm of inner spiritual warfare. Additionally, the prophet's order to eliminate dangerous creatures serves as a symbol of vigilance and responsibility. It is not enough to simply react when harm arrives. One must be aware of the potential dangers and act preemptively. This spiritual vigilance is symbolized in the Islamic concept of taqwa, God consciousness. The Prophet Peba demonstrated that true leadership involves foreseeing threats to the community and taking decisive, compassionate action to preserve its well-being. This foresight, rooted in wisdom and mercy, points to a larger spiritual truth, that believers must always be alert to the dangers of the world around them, both seen and unseen. Finally, the Prophet's actions also symbolize the deep interconnectedness between all of creation. Islam teaches that all life, whether human, animal, or plant, is part of a greater divine plan. While the Prophet Peba commanded the removal of dangerous creatures, it was not out of disdain for the creatures themselves, but out of a greater concern for preserving the balance of creation. This spiritual lesson calls believers to recognize that their actions in the world, even in the removal of harm, should be done with the utmost respect for God's creation and in alignment with His will.